Assalamualaikum, very good afternoon. So today we are going to cover chapter 7, chapter 7 which is the stock valuation. Basically in our schedule we are supposed to learn the long-term equity, right? And then after that only we learn how to value the stock. So for today, our learning goal will be, first one is to differentiate between debt and equity. What is debt and what is equity, right? So because we have two types of capital, one is debt capital, the other one is equity capital. The second one is discuss the right or characteristics and features of both common and preferred stock. What are the what are the characteristics of preferred stock, and also what are the characteristics of common stock. And the third objective, or the third goal, will be to describe the process of issuing common stock, and also including venture capital, how to go to public, and also the investment banker role, and also how to read the stock quotation from the newspaper, right? From the newspaper or from the internet, right? And the fourth objective is to understand the concept of market efficiency and the basic common stock valuation under the dual growth model, constant growth model, and also the variable growth model. So these are the three important topics, right? Three important topics for you to cover. Right? The next one will be discuss the free cash flow valuation model and the use of book value, liquidation value, and the price earning multiple and to estimate the common stock value. These are some of the other types of valuing the common stocks price. Then we have the free cash flow model, book value model, liquidation value, and also PE multiple ratio. And then we have to explain the relationship between among the financial institutions, return, risk, and the firm's value. What happens if return and risk increase? And what happens to the price of the share? When risk increase, what happens to the price? When return increase, what happens to the price? Price of the shares. The first objective today, differentiation between debt and equity capital. Now you look at this. This is in your textbook. We have characteristics in the first column, and then we have this type of capital, which is debt and also equity capital, right? So you look at the first characteristic, which is voice in management. If you look at debt, actually they don't have any voice in management. There are just lenders to the company. And then equity, yes, they have the voice in management because they have the voting right. Voting right, and they have the voting right. And then you look at the second one, claims on income and assets. If you look at debt, actually debt is linear to equity. If in the case the company goes bankrupt or winding up, so the debt will be paid first. The debt will be paid first, then only the equity stockholders will be paid on the proceeds of income and assets. Because after we have wind up the company, basically we'll sell off all the assets. Right? So basically the first one to receive this is the debt holders or the bond holders. Next only to the preferred stock, then only the common stockholders. Look at the third characteristic, maturity. So if you look at debt, for example bonds, they have stated maturity date. For example, 10 years, 25 years, 30 years. This is it's already stated, the maturity date. But if you look at equity, it is actually infinity. You can buy the shares. Actually, the shares can go until forever and ever after. right? So basically, if the company is okay, then the equity will be there as long as it is, right? Okay, because if the holders die or bankrupt, this equity will be passed to another person, okay, inherited by the heirs, right? So basically, let's look at the tax treatment. The last characteristic here, okay, that is actually interest deduction, interest deductible. And because if you look at the income statement, right, you have your earning before interest and tax, then you have to minus with interest, right? You get earning before tax, then you minus with taxes, okay, then only you minus taxes. So basically, interest has been deducted, okay, before you pay your tax. So that's why we call it is interest. That is actually interest deductible. You don't have to pay tax on your interest that you have paid, okay. But equity, there is no deduction, okay, for tax treatment, okay, no deduction. Okay, as you can see that we only pay the dividend after we have paid our tax. Earning after tax, then only you pay common stock dividend. Okay, so it is actually no deduction for tax treatment. So these are the major differences between the debt capital and also the equity capital. Right, these are the major differences. Okay. Now we look at the second slide. The nature of the equity capital. Okay. Now the first one, voice in management. Okay. The first one is voice in management. Okay. Now you can see that I mentioned before that the common stockholders have the voting right, whereas unlike the bondholders are merely lenders. Okay. So bondholders do not have voting rights. So when they do not have voting rights, they do not have the voice in management, right? Okay, so basically, unlike bondholders and other credit holders, holders of equity capital are the owners of the firm. So basically, if you buy the share of any company, you are actually the owner of the firms, right? So if you want to become the owner of TNB or University Tenaga Nasional, you have to buy TNB shares. Okay. When you hold the TNB shares, actually you are the owner of TNB, and indirectly you are also the owner of University Tenaga Nasional, right? So you are not just a student, but you are also the owner of the university. Okay. So, and we look at the second one, okay, so this I have mentioned before, the voting right, right? So these common equity holders have voting right, okay, that permit them to elect the firm boards of directors and to vote on special issues. Okay, basically, if you look at this voting right, okay, they have the privilege to elect who are the board of directors. Because the board of directors are actually the one who will declare how much dividend should be paid to the stockholders. So they have to be very careful to whoever they want to elect to become as the board of directors, because they don't want to elect a cheapskate board of directors. Cheapskate, no? Cheapskate, you know, cheapskate. Good. Okay, so if you elect the cheapskate board of directors, you will be able to receive any dividends. Okay, so that's why they have the privilege to vote and to permit them to elect, okay, the firm board of directors. Okay, the third one is bondholders and preferred stockholders receive no such privilege. So basically, if you are the bondholders, you are without the privilege of electing the board of directors. Okay, you are without the voice in management. you don't have any privilege. Now we look at the second characteristic, which is claims on income and also assets. Okay, as you see that the previous slide, I mentioned before that debt has senior claims on income and assets to the equity holders because they are the lenders. So basically, what the equity holders or the common stock holders have are actually the residual claims. Okay, residual claim in bahasa Malaysia we call it makan kuah saja, right? Makan kuah lah. For example, like this one, you are in a party, okay, or a kenduri, right? So you went to eat the kenduri, okay, but you are the last one to have the privilege to eat all the lauk. So what you have only the kuah only, right? Only the kuah or the sauces, right? So that's what we call the residual claim. Okay, the privilege is to the VIP people, okay, the big guns, and then only you, right? So orang rumah lah kat penangga kan, orang rumah makan dah, makan kuah. Okay, basically, but this that is out of the area, right? So this is an analogy. Okay, the next one, okay, their claims cannot be paid until the claim of all other creditors, including both interest and principal on debt has been settled. Okay, basically, if there are claims on debts, okay, for example, bondholders, creditors, bankers, in the case of the company goes bankrupt, these principal and interest must be paid first. Okay, until we finish settling all the debts and principal, all the debts, interest and principal, then only we can pay to the common stockholders, right? So this is okay. The next one, okay, because equity holders are the last to receive distribution. Okay, they are the last person. Okay, they expect greater returns to compensate, okay, them for the additional risk they bear. Okay, so they expect a greater return. Okay, if you look at the stockholders, they expect return in terms of dividends and also in terms of capital gains. Okay, capital gains. Now, if you look at the analogy that I've given to you before, right? So basically, if you are in the kenduri, right? So if you are the last one to receive, to eat all the kenduri things, right? All the lauk pauk, so you might have a bigger return. For example, ayam ke, ekor ke kan. So yang last kali kan, so you makan privilege. You expect a better return now. Right? So this is the analogy. Okay. Now we look at the third characteristic, which is maturity. Okay, maturity. As I mentioned before, that the debt holders, the debt such as bonds, have stated maturity, or any debt. For example, bank loans, they have maturity. For example, in 25 years, you have to pay your debts, right? You have to pay your debts. But for equity holders or equity, there is no stated maturity date. Okay, it is until infinity. Okay, until infinity. So you look at equity capital is actually a permanent form of financing. It is a permanent form of financing. Once the debt, the equity has been issued, there will be in the market as long as it can be. Right? Okay. So equity has no maturity date and never has to be repaid by the firm. Okay. So once the equity has been issued to the public, okay, so these companies do not have to pay the public anything, okay, unless they want to repurchase back the equity. So that is different case, right? That is repurchase back the equity or the stocks. Look at the last characteristic, which is the tax treatment. Okay. So I've mentioned before, I've given you some views on how are we going to pay the interest and also tax, and then only we pay the dividends, right? So basically, while interest paid to the bondholders is tax deductible, because you pay interest first, okay, you get your earning before tax, then only you pay tax, right? So actually interest is on the top, so it is actually deductible. But if you look at the dividend, it's actually paid after you have paid the tax, so it is not interest deductible. So dividend paid to preferred and common stockholders is not interest deductible. Okay, so this is one reason why some companies would prefer to go for debts rather than issuing common stocks. Okay, because they don't have the privilege or they don't have the advantage of tax treatment. Okay, so in fact, this further lower the cost of debt relative to the cost of equity, okay, as a source of financing to the firm. Okay, so it lower the cost of debt. Okay, and basically, if you look at this and you plus all the plus minus, debt here, issuing debt is has a lower cost rather than you issue common stock. Okay. Now you look at the common stock. Okay. We have finished with common stock, the characteristic of common stock, the nature of common stock. Now I don't want to explain about the characteristic of the bonds or the debt. All we have covered in our previous lecture. Okay, we go straight to common stock. Okay, common stock. Now we look at the common stock. Common stockholders, who are sometimes referred to as residual owners or residual claimants, are the true owners of the firm. Okay, this is already mentioned to you, right? So, as a residual owners, common stockholders receive what is left. Okay, what is left, which is the residual. Okay, after all the claims on the firm income and assets have been satisfied, for example, paying debts, paying your creditors and such as that. Okay, and also don't forget your preferred stockholders. Okay, then only common stockholders. This is the last one, and the last one to receive anything, and the common stockholders. So because of this uncertain position, common stockholders expect to be compensated with adequate dividends, and ultimately, okay, this is the main reason why the common stockholders want to hold stocks. They want to get capital gains. Okay, capital gains is actually simple, right? You buy the stock at 1 ringgit, and then the price increases to 2 ringgit. So what you do, you sell the stocks, and the differences between the selling price and your purchase price is your capital gain, right? So 1 ringgit. That one is we ignore the tax effect. So we actually have to pay also some tax on our capital gain. Okay, so basically 1 ringgit is our capital gain. So this is why people like to join in the market, in stock market. Okay, they will buy shares and then they sell the shares. They buy low and then they sell high. Okay, this is our theory. Okay, fundamental in finance: buy low, sell high. Okay, we don't buy high and then sell low. That one we are facing losses. Okay, so look at ownership. The common stock of a firm can be privately owned by an individual, or maybe by or closely owned by a small group of investors. Okay, or publicly owned by a broad group of investors. Okay, so privately owned, normally sendirian berhad, that is actually privately owned. Sendirian berhad. Okay, privately owned, right? So, and then closely owned is actually a small group of investors. Okay, they open it but only to a small group of investors. And then lastly, it is publicly owned, which is open to the public to buy the shares. Okay, this you can see what the shares which is listed in the stock exchange, KLSE. Okay, typically small corporations are privately or closely owned, and if their shares are traded, these occur infrequently and in a small amount. Okay, so basically these are not traded. In Malaysia, this is a very rare cases. Rare. Jarang-jarang. Okay, last corporation are typically publicly owned and have shares that are actively traded in the Colombo Stock Exchange. Okay, Colombo Stock Exchange, for example, in Malaysia, or New York Stock Exchange in US. Okay, Chicago Board of Exchange. Okay, a lot of other exchanges, a lot of exchanges in the world. Okay, every country has their own stock exchange market. Okay, now we look at a more detailed part of the common stock. More detailed part of the common stock. Par value. Okay, if you look at bond, the nature of bond, we have a par value for bonds. For example, the par value of bond normally is 1,000. Okay, 1,000. But as you look at common stock, the par value is only 1 ringgit. 1 ringgit. Okay, 1 ringgit for the par value. So actually it is insignificant. It is insignificant. The par value 1 ringgit. Insignificant. So unlike bond, common stock may be sold without par value. Right? Okay, they can be sold without any par value because we look at the market value. Okay, market value. Okay, the par value of the common stock is generally low, 1 ringgit, and is relatively useless value established in the firm corporate charter. Okay, 1 ringgit, it's no value actually for one share. Okay, right. So a low par value may be advantageous in states where certain corporate taxes, okay, are based on the par value of the shares. Okay, these are some of the advantages, right? But this one we are talking about in United States of America, okay? Because they have different states. For example, they have the Oklahoma state, they have Minnesota state. Different states have different regulations. Okay, different tax treatment. Okay, certain states pay higher tax, certain states pay lower tax. Okay, so this is why some of these happen. Okay, look at preemptive right. Okay, preemptive right actually is, what is preemptive? Okay, do you know preemptive right?